4 months ago, I had another dream with Pastor Steve Hill, and I don't get dreams with Pastor Steve Hill normally. Every dream that I have gotten with him had some kind of relevance and tie in to the Spiritual Avalanche Project, which God has joined me to back in 2010. Now, I have several videos on my channel describing those, and I will put them down in the description below if you would like to catch up on that. But suffice it to say is that the Lord put me on a mission to refresh the message of Pastor Steve Hill that he received from Jesus concerning the spiritual avalanche in the church. And to that end, it led to my doing this album, which has 19 songs. And yeah, I just released it. I was working towards the time when I had this dream on May 18th this year. I was just a week and a day away from the digital release date of this album. What I just held up to you is the CD version, which came a month later on June 18th, and they're not the same thing. They have the same songs, but the CD version allowed me to also include the insert, which gave a brief version of the handprint of God, the amazing journey behind it, as well as on the album itself. I was able to also include narrations at the appropriate time that point out the various parts of the spiritual avalanche threat happening in the church that Pastor Steve Hill related. Spiritual Avalanche Warning Vision the Lord gave Pastor Steve Hill, playing out today, not gone away. Sometime back I saw Steve Hill share on Sid Roth a powerful vision. So this dream that happened, I have to give you the circumstances. Like I said, I was just a week and a day away from the release date of the digital version. At the same time, I was in heavy warfare. I was at the point where I was crawling on my elbows to try to meet these God-given deadlines, because the attacks of the enemy, they were vicious and relentless. I had the last video I posted before that, I had posted May 14th, but I actually had filmed it April 4th, and it had been an update on my album. So the condition that you saw me there really wasn't the condition that I was in at the time, because on May 11th, along with all the different things of the enemy, I had suffered two fractured vertebrae in my back. I am now recovered from it. Hallelujah, thank the Lord. But it was fresh. I had just gotten over another problem the enemy had given me, plus a couple of other ones that were being focused to try to make life unlivable for me. Unlivable, so that if I had not had Jesus even, that it could push a person over the edge. And that's the kind of terrible situation I was in, because you can imagine, I told you I had fractured two vertebrae, so that's not like stepping on your toe or something small. That's something deep and involving, and I already had other issues. And I was yet to face other issues even harder than that all at the same time. So anyways, I found myself having the situation, if you've ever fractured your back, had two vertebrae who are fractured. I never had, so that was the first for me. And I didn't know it at the time, like I said, but I couldn't move in certain ways, even getting into bed and everything else. And so I had crawled into bed with a heater, and I was just lifting it to the Lord as I was literally crawling into bed, how I had just gotten over something and I'd gotten hit with something else and hit with something else. It was just really vicious what was happening. And more things were yet to come as I was getting close, and as I first had published the digital version, and then when I moved on to the CD version, it was just relentless. Like I said, if I wasn't a Christian, if I didn't have the Lord to cling to, if I didn't know the reality of heaven or hell, it was meant to destroy. But Jesus is victor, and through Jesus I can go through everything. And we're called to endure. So I lifted that up to the Lord as I got into bed. And I ended up having this dream. And the dream was with Pastor Steve Hill. And the dream happened, and I woke up right at the end of the dream on the same evening. So it was May 18th. And I keep emphasizing the date because if you have seen anything of my channel, if you followed anything about my albums, my songs, about this particular project, Spiritual Avalanche, of my album called Spiritual Avalanche Threat, Step 2, Jesus Ain't Through, you would have heard me share in several videos how this has been something that God has revealed himself through synchronistic events. And I'm not talking 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. I mean, I might be up 25 synchronistic events along the way showing God's handprint. And I've been sharing these. And so, in fact, in my album update that I posted in May, I had shared a more recent one that I had discovered I didn't know about. And then after I did that one, which was February 18th, I discovered even yet another one, January 8th, that I had missed. So anyways, I was, because of this heightened awareness to the date, May 18th, about what I had dreamed about. And so now because of synchronicity, so I've been sharing about how God has been showing his hand behind it through synchronistic events. In fact, I like to use that term synchronistic, because it's a world-accepted word to describe things that hasn't fallen under the censorship that exists on YouTube. It's not just related to the faith. There are certain words, though, however, in different subjects that trigger censorship. And this doesn't. But, in the Christian faith, synchronicity is also something recognized, because that's how we share God behind things, that he's showing it through things that are synchronistically happening. And so this has been the case. I had a strong, heavy, overwhelming, undeniable plethora of synchronistic events showing God behind this whole project. And so that's why I'm really zeroing in on May 18th. In fact, I'm going to, because I was unable to, first of all, I had just a week into having my back fractured. I recorded it by audio, but I was like kind of moaning, groaning, having trouble, and I certainly wasn't going to post that on my channel. I was going to wait till I had improved to share it. And on top of it, I was having overwhelming things happening. I mean, huge, overwhelming things, all themselves crisis of their own. It says the next month my father fell twice, and he ended up being admitted to rehab, and he's not even yet out. It's going to be 100 days next month. And so many things that were high level at the same time. Because as the Bible tells us, we are not waging war against flesh. We're waging war against rulers and principalities of darkness. And those of you who labor for the Lord, when you're doing something that is steered to Jesus, those hits, man alive, they become where evil is unveiled, and they're meant to destroy. And I found myself in this because this is really something dear to the Lord, and it threatens the enemy. multiple plans of theirs where they have believers in the faith not knowing, various of them, that they are on false snow. And this false snow, like any avalanche false snow ground, is set to take all these lives. In fact, the Lord has put me on one to give me an inner understanding for the last 3 years. And I have seen how many are deceived and intractably held captive on these false snow areas where they are set to perish. So for that end, I'm going to take a moment here to show you the actual, and to record it, really. Record it for the sake of this being recorded, because everything I'm doing here is for perhaps later, how can I say, reference and evidence that this really happened, especially because of the nature of the internet. The internet breeds fables. It breeds false information, and it breeds falsehoods. So I've always taken the time, if I get a dream, it's like I've gotten some prophetic dreams where if you go back to my channel, you will see that when I had them, I posted them. And some of them, when they have come true, I have then gone back and say, look, 2 or 3 years ago, I got this prophetic dream. And now, look, it's come true. And I'm able to show that. You can't fake that. And that's in order to show the truth of it. It's very important that we take the time to show the truth, because the enemy is using these falsehoods that are on the internet that are seeming to live faith at first, and then they're discovered to be false. He's wickedly using them as a tool to tear down faith, even get some people to leave the faith. See, this devil, he's very clever. He's an adversary that has been a long time. He's been with the planet humanity since its inception in the Garden of Eden. Okay, so I'm showing you right here, this is the actual recording, and I'm going to play just the very beginning of it. You see it's dated May 18, 2021, MP3. I pop it up. Imperfect as this recording is going to be, I'm going to do it right now, start it right now, because I woke up from a dream. Okay, see, I'm exhaling you some pain, so that's why I didn't want to play it for you. And so, let me move it to, if I can even get to where I actually start. Alright, so here's just a brief part of it. I just had a dream with Steve Hill, so I'm going to record. I'm going to be faithful because I remember it sharply. I just pray that I can get down exactly the meanings. Okay, so that's what I want to show. Just to set the evidence right now that I had it the day that I said I had it, because what I told you, because these events having to deal with this project of the spiritual avalanche have revolved around synchronistic timing. So that's why I'm focusing on it. If you just walked into it, it may not make sense to you, but if you catch up on all my videos, then you understand this is part of the task that the Lord is having me do, which is to notate and make known these dates so that God's hand behind it is without a doubt. So as I said, I had that dream. I had just woken up from the dream, and I wanted to share what the dream was about. It was about Steve Hill. The dream was about Steve Hill. It was at this point now, it's been the last dream I've had of Steve Hill to date, and all the dreams I have had of Steve Hill, as I explained, Pastor Stephen Hill, who passed away a few years ago, all have been tied to something showing the handprint of God. Okay, and so that's what I'm trying to tell you right now. So this was the latest dream that I had, and as I had the dream, I told you I had crawled into bed, I had lifted to the Lord, that I had just gotten over something, and here I was hit again. And it was very demoralizing, and I was trying to hang on. And it was really serious because, I didn't know, like I said, I didn't know I had my two vertebrae fractured, but, I was having a serious struggle along with other things jointly happening, plus trying to finish an album of 19 songs. The songs were done, but I was doing at that point the artwork, and I was trying to get it all together. It's actually a huger project than I had even realized the amount of work to get everything done. So I just lifted it to Jesus. And so I went to sleep, and I had that dream. And in the dream, I was like a symbolic version of where I am now, where I'm in a room in the house that is actually entirely cut off from the house. So I can't go to the house from within the house. I have to actually go outside and go through the outside entrance. And my mother was in the other part of the house, like she is. And she was, I had a view of her as if I had a video view like I have, it was Amazon Echo, their tiny little, like video intercom, where I can see into the living room if, when I desire to. But this was like a large screen video where I could see beyond the scope where I could see into the kitchen and in the living room jointly, and it was a large view. And I could see my mother in the kitchen, and I saw there with her was Pastor Steve Hill. Wow, Pastor Steve Hill was with my mother. And I got the information really like inferred to me that he was there because he came for me, because he's waiting for me. He was waiting for me. And I understood without words being spoken that he was waiting for me for when I would get my act together and be able to go with him, because we were going to be working together. And that's why he was there. In the meantime, he was leaning against the wall. He was very casual. And he was talking this way with my mother, who at the time of the dream, she was going to turn 92 the next month. So you can imagine a 91-year-old a woman. She's small. She's like 4'10", maybe. I think she's like 4'10". Over the years, people shrink, and my mother has shrunk several inches. So here she was, and he was talking to her. And he was talking to her as a way to pass the time while he was waiting for me to finish everything I had to do in order to be able to go where he was, so we would go off to be working together. And so he had come there because he was actually, in that time while he was waiting for me, he was taking the time to work with my mom. And this is the thing about it, is that what I mean by that is, while they were in the kitchen together, he was leaning against the wall and they were casually talking. My mother had seen from where she was in the kitchen, her television. She always keeps her TV on. And it's the opposite of me. I never watch television, but my mother always keeps her big TV on. And so she was seeing, all of a sudden, at the same time that Steve was there, before her talking, he came onto the television screen in the living room, and she could see he was preaching, and she could see he was a pastor. And she didn't say anything to him, but she was looking between one and the other, and this convinced her that he was a genuine pastor as she saw him speaking. It wasn't anything that he was telling her directly, but from seeing him at the same time he appeared on the television, that was him, and that he was preaching in such a way that convinced her he was a genuine man of God. Not that he was just a preacher she wouldn't respect, because the problem is that my mother, she's Catholic. And in her time of being Catholic, she has gotten some bad practices of praying to statues. And I have tried to tell her that this is not the way to pray, that Jesus is the only mediator. But to give you an example, she's just intractable in that. She's been intractable that she would tell me when the Mormons would come knocking on the door, she would share to me that she would tell them, I'm Catholic and I'm not going to convert. And she would be very adamant about it, close the door. She would love to do that, just to tell them that. And so you see, she was intractable in this. And here I'm her daughter. And, you know, the Bible says that when we do things like we prophesy, we're in positions like this, that in our own town and are in our own homes, we're not respected or honored what we said, because Jesus himself had that very experience. His brothers had no respect for him. They would make fun of him. Go off and go do your preaching, you know, things like that. So often, especially my mother now, when I myself converted to, I was born again around 11 years ago. And I wasn't living with my mother at the time. We weren't living, I didn't see her. So it was just only a handful of years that we began living together. And so when I came then, she had, at one point about 3 years ago, she had added to the backyard a Virgin Mary statue. And that, I know that statue and other little idols that she had around the house were causing hindrances to me to be able to deliver another family member, as well as having other problems for the house, because, you know, these things, they do impact. So as I said, I had tried to, you know, the way we treat elderly, trying to get her to realize that, but I had not been able to. She had been resisting. So Steve Hill was spending this time with her for the effort, because she was my mother. And see, because also it was all in the dream. It was all inferred. As I have shared in the other dreams I had with Steve Hill, the relationship we have together is one of co-workers. Co-workers who are very fond of one another, you know, that kind of co-worker, not co-workers who really get along, co-workers who might go out for coffee afterwards, who might go out with their different families together, like, you know, like a family extension. So that's how I came to see that Steve Hill and I are. And in one dream I had, we were this co-workers, but we never talked to each other. We each were off doing our part in the mission to herd the people to the truth. So this is the kind of relationship we had. So because I was a dear co-worker of his, he had come to work with my mother to get her to the full regular Christianity that doesn't involve idols. And he was doing it his casual way. He wasn't being in any way pushy about it. He wasn't even directly doing it. So however, the timings happening were all God things, that while he was talking to her, suddenly a very powerful preaching episode of his comes on TV, and she was jointly watching that and looking at him. And that convinced her on her own. You see, if he had tried to actually convince her directly, as I did, she would resist. Because, you know, sometimes when you get a certain age, you become, if you're directly told something, you just resist because you're told something. And so this was work, so she saw it on her own, and she was convinced on her own with him just standing before her, just talking casually. And so it was at the point where she was letting him lead her in a sermon, and she was answering him back even. And so I was watching this as I was doing whatever I was doing, because I really don't know what I was doing. I was just trying to get a bunch of things done to get my act together, to be in the space and place to be able to then go off for Steve and I to go to the next step where he and I then would be working together. Right now, at that dream, I was doing things on my own. I had to get done before I could go that further step. But while I was doing those things, at the same time, I was seeing Steve working with my mother. And I finally had come to a place where I could go. And so I left, and when I came into the house, Steve was not there. My mother was there, however, and she was standing there, and she told me that this guy had come for me, and she said to me, "Do you know he's a pastor?" And I said to her, I said, "Mom, yes, I know." And I said, "Mom, he was." And I said, "Mom, his name is Steve Hill. And he died a few years ago. And he was a pastor." And I said to her, and this wasn't quite registering. I said, "Mom, he passed away a few years ago. And I did see him with you now. I was able to see him with you. But Mom, he passed away, and he used to be a pastor." And at that point, I woke up. So that was pretty interesting that here, it was like reality. It was like while he was waiting for me to do the things that I'm actually caught up in things to do, I have mentioned, I think in my last video about my music album, that if I didn't mention it, I put it in my album. I've got so many material working on that. The Lord has moved me to also be working on a book of the behind the scenes stories on this. Not a great book, not a big book, but a good story that has to be told because it's really amazing. And in the meantime, I'm dealing with the Ephesians 6 stuff, all these things, and I have to complete that before I will actually be promoting the album. Because even though I put it out on Amazon, and I did also separately make the CD, I only did it to meet those dates. I haven't done any promoting other than the little video like here where I'm sharing this dream, so I'm having to reference the album. That's all I'm doing, but I've not done anything because I'm actually have it on hold until I finish the whole project, because this album being done at 75%. There's a 25% I have not yet completed, and the timing is not yet done. Otherwise, I would be there. And so the timing is not yet for me to be promoting it. And it's really, to me, it was like an answer to the prayer I had just given Jesus to help me hanging on, help me to endure, because so much was hitting me that he was giving me hope. He was letting me see I wasn't, even though I felt like I was being crushed, there was victory. There was victory because Steve Hill was there, waiting in the wings for when we would be working together, which wasn't right then. And on top of it, that there was an agenda to get my mother out of this idolatry stuff. And the fact that at the very end, when it was like real life, I was just telling my mother, "Look, he passed away. I saw him with you. I want you to know that he was a pastor. He used to be alive, and however, Mother, I did see him with you." And that was pretty fascinating. So to me though, when I woke up, it was about 3 minutes before midnight, still May 18th. And so because of that, it was a Steve Hill dream. I recorded it. And I did look to see if there was any tie-in up front dealing with May 18th and Steve Hill, but I didn't find any. So that has led me to conclude, if this is another fingerprint of God, then it has to revolve around the date itself, May 18th. And so perhaps nothing now, but I am being faithful. I've recorded this dream. It's a little bit late, but I have the evidence that it was done then, and I'm posting it, and I'll let it percolate. And if it turns out to come true in some manner to show that connection to God, if May 18th happens to be it, dealing with this project, I will surely make a video and and share that. Just the way I have made videos on some of the prophetic dreams I had that 1, 2, 3 years have come true. I have had those dreams posted way back when they happened, and then when they did come true 1, 2, 3 years later, I then made videos and I showed the video back then. Look, I actually made this video, see? And I'm telling the truth. This really happened this way. Which, these are really, like I said, it's really important that we take the time to do this, because we are countering Satan's agenda to make false testimonies with the agenda he's going to use them, like those magic tricks you saw where the person has gotten fragile things on a table and the tablecloth is just yanked off, and if it's done expertly, things stay. If not, everything dashes. Well, Satan's plan is to yank off the credibility down the road so that faith is crushed. So that's why I myself will record this to show later on evidence that holds up that prophecies, things that show evidence of God, that they are real. They're not invented things just to get traffic, publicity. In fact, if anything, I can tell you in truth, when you start doing things like this, with this kind of showing things, and they start showing truth, in a way, it seems you start to get censored, because the enemy, Ephesians 6, doesn't want this to be out. They want falsehoods to be out. They don't want faith to be built up. So they find ways to hide these things through one manner or another. But anyways, I'm so glad I finally got this up. It's been hell, literally. And I do want to report, though, I am fully healed, as I said. That's a miracle. And from the fractured back. And so it's exciting to me. I'm looking forward to seeing. I'm really expecting to see somehow May 18th. How is it going to tie in the future to this project? Believe me, I will let you know